57-year-old Paul Williams and 56-year-old David Swick were grabbing a bite to eat at JJ's Fish and Chicken on Chicago's South Side in October of 2024 when they were shot dead by one of the restaurant's employees. The double homicide was captured on surveillance video, which reportedly showed 42-year-old Mehdi Medellel approaching the victims who were homeless and shooting them both in the head at around 10:30 p.m. In the footage, one of the victims could be seen going through a suitcase on the floor while the other ate. The man with the suitcase could be seen backing away as Medellel approached with the murder weapon in hand. After executing the victims in cold blood, he left the restaurant. Medellel had gotten into an argument with Williams and Swick just before opening fire on them, and both men were pronounced dead at the scene. The accused gunman was arrested less than an hour after the shooting. He's facing 2 counts of first-degree murder and remains held without bail at the Cook County Jail. Number 29. Caitlin Tracey. 36-year-old Caitlin Tracey's life was unexpectedly cut short on October 27th of 2024 when she was found dead at the bottom of a stairwell at her husband's luxury high-rise condo building in Chicago's South Loop neighborhood. She had succumbed to severe injuries, including a severed foot, after falling 24 stories, but her manner of death and whether foul play was involved remain undetermined. Tracey's estranged husband of 6 months, 46-year-old tax attorney Adam Paul Beckerink, had reported her missing that very same day, and she had been last seen 2 days earlier. He was briefly detained due to alleged inconsistencies in the stories he gave police, but has not been charged in connection with his wife's death. The couple had a tumultuous relationship, as evidenced by a domestic violence case out of New Buffalo, Michigan, where they had lived before relocating to Chicago. Tracey had also obtained an emergency order of protection against Beckerink, noting in her application to the court that she feared further abuse, but she withdrew the petition after Beckerink threatened to sue her for defamation and libel. During the same week Tracey died, Beckerink had failed to appear in court in Berrien County for aggravated domestic violence, resisting and obstruction, and larceny charges for the previous case. In March of 2025, a warrant was issued out of Michigan for Beckerink's arrest. He waived extradition and was taken to Berrien County, where he posted bond and was released. Tracey's parents have accused Beckerink of abusing their daughter, but he maintains his innocence. The investigation into Tracey's death is ongoing, and Beckerink is currently awaiting trial for the domestic abuse case, which was originally scheduled to begin in April, but has met with repeated delays. Number 28. Micheail Ward. High school student Hadaya Pendleton had just finished her final exams for the semester when she was killed in Chicago's Kenwood neighborhood in January of 2013. The incident occurred in Harsh Park, where the victim was shot twice from behind, in what was later described as a case of mistaken identity. Pendleton had recently performed at then-President Barack Obama's second inauguration, which is one of the reasons why her death caught national attention. Police traced the crime to 2 known gang members, Micheail Ward and Kenneth Williams. Witnesses identified Ward as the shooter and Williams as the getaway driver. Ward, who was on probation for a previous gun charge at the time of the shooting, reportedly admitted to mistaking Pendleton's group for rival gang members, and both he and Williams were charged with a laundry list of crimes, including first-degree murder, attempted murder, aggravated battery with a firearm, and more. Both defendants were found guilty in 2018, and Williams was sentenced to 42 years in prison, while Ward received an 84-year sentence. In an unexpected turn of events, however, Ward's case was overturned in 2023 after an appellate court ruled that he had been denied representation during questioning and that certain evidence had been improperly withheld. In 2025, the Illinois Supreme Court voted in favor of granting him a new trial, which is expected to occur sometime within the next year. Number 27. Darion McMillian. 26-year-old Chicago police officer Enrique Martinez was killed in the line of duty during a traffic stop on November 4th of 2024 when one of the vehicle's occupants opened fire on police. Martinez and other officers had stopped to speak with the driver after noticing that the car was blocking traffic. During their conversation with the motorist, the cops noticed a front seat passenger, later identified as 23-year-old Darion McMillian, reaching for a bag on the floor. Instead of obeying law enforcement's orders to stop reaching, he pulled a gun, equipped with a fully automatic conversion device, also known as a Glock switch, and began firing. He shot both Officer Martinez and the driver, then pushed the gravely wounded driver out of the vehicle and got behind the wheel. Another officer grabbed McMillian's arm and was dragged for several feet as the suspect threw the car into reverse and stepped on the gas. He crashed the car, ditched it, and and went into a nearby apartment where he cut off a GPS ankle monitor he was wearing in connection with a previous criminal case. Despite his getaway efforts, McMillian was apprehended 10 minutes after the shooting. In the meantime, Martinez was pronounced dead, while the other officer was treated for non-life-threatening injuries. The driver of the car that the suspect was riding in also died from his wounds. At the time of the shooting, McMillian was already a convicted felon. He had been placed on the ankle monitor after attempting to cheat on a drug and alcohol test, and had also been accused of beating a fellow inmate back in 2020. McMillian remains held without bond at the Cook County Jail on suspicion of 2 counts of first-degree murder and multiple gun and drug-related charges. Number 26. Kierra Coles. 26-year-old postal worker Kierra Coles was 3 months pregnant with her first child when she vanished in Chicago's Chatham neighborhood on October 2nd of 2018. During her last phone conversation with her mother, she said she was shopping for her baby. Coles went radio silent after that, and her family reported her missing 2 days later. Officers forced entry into the young woman's apartment but found no sign of her. In the hours leading up to her disappearance, surveillance cameras captured footage of Coles driving away from her apartment with a man late at night. She went to a nearby Walgreens where she withdrew several $100s from an ATM. Later that night, the male subject was seen exiting the passenger side of the car elsewhere in the city, but no one got out of the driver's side. The next day, he parked the car outside Coles' apartment complex, retrieved some items from inside the residence, and drove away in his own car, which was parked nearby. Police consider the man a person of interest but have not revealed his identity. He reportedly gave varying accounts of the last time he saw Coles, whose family believes he knows something about her daughter's disappearance. Multiple cash rewards totaling tens of thousands of dollars have been offered for information leading to the identification and arrest of a suspect, and Coles' mother has repeatedly pleaded with the public in hopes that someone will come forward with information. But Coles remains missing to this day, and no one has been charged. A $25,000 reward is currently being offered by the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, and in 2024, a police spokesperson told USA Today that the investigation remains open, but with no new leads pouring in, the case is considered cold. Number 25. Michael Washington and Eric Adams. 24-year-old Brittany Hill was holding her baby when she was shot dead in the street in broad daylight on May 28th of 2019. She was speaking with 2 acquaintances outside a car shortly before 9 a.m. when 2 men pulled up in a Chevy Impala. Both suspects exited the vehicle and shot the young mother in the upper body, while she hid behind vehicles in a desperate attempt to protect her daughter. The child survived uninjured, but Hill died from her wounds after taking herself to a nearby hospital. 2 days later, police arrested 39-year-old Michael Washington and 23-year-old Eric Adams in connection with the case during the suspect's trial. In the spring of 2025, prosecutors revealed that Hill's daughter waved and smiled at the defendants before they opened fire. Adams' defense attorney argued that there was no video evidence of his client shooting at the victim, but the jury found both men guilty of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and aggravated discharge of a firearm. Records showed that Adams received sentences totaling 110 years, including 40 years for the murder conviction, but it's unclear whether they will be served concurrently or consecutively. Washington remains in custody at the Cook County Jail and appears to be awaiting sentencing. Number 24. Genesis Silva. 33-year-old Brittany Battaglia vanished in June of 2023 after leaving her apartment to visit her boyfriend, 34-year-old Genesis Silva. She never returned home, prompting her concerned roommate to contact Battaglia's brother, who said she never arrived at a party she was planning to attend. They went to the police, who pulled Silva over near his apartment 2 days later and escorted him back to the residence. Inside the apartment, officers found Battaglia's body stuffed into a duffel bag. She had been brutally stabbed to the point of being nearly decapitated, and there was evidence of blood that had been cleaned using supplies that were found in the kitchen. Detectives also found handwritten notes containing lists of cleaning supplies and chemicals, along with a note stating, "Can you ask average time until smell, etc., as well as 2 machetes, an ice pick, and 2 cell phones inside Silva's backpack, pockets, and car." Silva has been a registered offender since 2009, when he was convicted of abusing his wife at the time. He managed to avoid jail time in that case despite originally facing 13 felony charges and allegations that he forced himself on and severely mistreated the victim. During an initial court hearing, Silva's defense attorney argued that none of the items he was caught with were considered weapons under state law and hadn't been linked to Battaglia's murder. The judge remanded the defendant into custody at the Cook County Jail, where he remains held in lieu of $1.5 million bond as he awaits his next court hearing in late July. Number 23. Xavier Tate Jr. 30-year-old Chicago police officer Luis Huesca was on his way home from work on April 21st of 2024 when he was ambushed in Gage Park by 22-year-old Xavier L. Tate Jr., who shot him 10 times and stole his car. Huesca's fellow officers found him just before 3 o'clock in the morning, and he was pronounced dead a short while later at a nearby hospital. By the time police arrived, Tate had fled the scene. He was connected to the crime through DNA, fingerprints, surveillance footage, and a relative's bank card that he paid for a bottle of water with after the shooting. Acting on tips that the suspect had fled the state, investigators looked for Tate in Wisconsin and Iowa but did not find him in either state. 2 weeks after the murder, law enforcement tracked him down at an apartment in the Illinois suburb of Glendale Heights. He was taken into custody using Officer Huesca's handcuffs and has pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder, aggravated vehicular hijacking, and possession of a stolen firearm. In early June of 2025, Glendale Heights resident Malik Murphy pleaded guilty to 1 count of obstructing justice for harboring Tate at his home. It's unclear how he and the defendant knew one another, but authorities believe Tate spent 2 to 3 days at the home before his capture. Murphy was sentenced to 2 years of probation and 30 hours of community service, and the case against Tate is ongoing. Number 22. Akaysha Miller. 19-year-old up-and-coming rapper Akaysha Miller was fatally shot in broad daylight in Chicago's North Lawndale neighborhood in May of 2025. She was sitting in a parked car at around 2:30 p.m. when 3 individuals approached the vehicle. One of the suspects fired multiple gunshots, striking the young woman in the head and torso. Miller tried driving away from the scene but lost control of the car and crashed into a tree. She was pronounced dead after being rushed to Mount Sinai Hospital. No arrests have been made, and the Chicago police have appealed to the public for information on the case, which remains under investigation. In the meantime, the circumstances surrounding the shooting remain unclear. Number 21. Thomas Phelps. During the early morning hours of May 27, 2025, 38-year-old Cordell A. Avant was shot multiple times on Chicago's far south side by a man in an SUV. He died from his injuries, and the suspected shooter, 33-year-old Thomas Phelps, was arrested less than 2 hours later in the Auburn-Gresham neighborhood. According to police, Phelps killed Avant during an argument, although the nature of the disagreement is unclear. He's facing 1 count of first-degree murder and several drug-related felonies, including 1 count of cannabis manufacturing and delivery and 2 counts of possession of a controlled substance in an amount deemed illegal. The accused killer is being held without bond at the Cook County Jail pending the outcome of his case. Number 20. Elijah Stiffened. 19-year-old recent high school graduate Syra C. Magby was shot in Chicago's Back of the Yards neighborhood while behind the wheel of a Chevy Malibu late one evening in June of 2024. She was with 2 other teenagers, including her boyfriend, who survived without injury after a man in a stolen SUV approached the vehicle and opened fire on them. Magby was struck in the upper back, causing her to lose control of the car and crash into a Volkswagen Jetta. She died after being rushed to a nearby hospital in critical condition, while the Jetta's occupant survived with minor injuries. Magby's family told reporters that the young woman had just started a new job as a security guard that day and may have been celebrating with her friends. The shooter fled the scene and remained at large until March of 2025, when authorities announced the arrest of 20-year-old Elijah Stiffened on suspicion of first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. According to police, Magby and her boyfriend had been on cordial terms with Stiffened until a mutual friend was killed. Prior to the shooting, Magby's boyfriend had seen someone pointing their vehicle out to Stiffened outside a gas station, prompting Magby to drive away. Police say that Stiffened followed Magby until he caught up with the car and shot her. The judge ordered Stiffened to remain held without bail, but he does not appear to be in custody at this time, leaving the current status of the case unclear. Number 19. Henry Graham. 49-year-old Henry Graham already had multiple prior convictions for battery and assault when he was accused of beating 53-year-old Russell Long to death on Chicago's Magnificent Mile in late June of 2023. He attacked the victim shortly before 4 p.m. in broad daylight with a closed fist to the back of the head, causing Long to collapse onto the ground. As blood poured from Long's head, Graham sat on a fire hydrant and watched for several minutes. He walked away when he overheard sirens, but witnesses followed him and flagged down a passing cop. Graham reportedly admitted to striking Long in police body cam footage, but was not taken into custody despite his documented history of randomly attacking people in an unprovoked fashion. In the meantime, Long was rushed to the hospital where he died 2 weeks later from a traumatic brain injury. Graham was charged with Long's murder 3 months later while in the Cook County Jail for an unrelated arrest. He remains in custody while his case begs the more general question of how to effectively treat mentally ill repeat offenders and prevent the systemic failures that lead to avoidable tragedies. Number 18. Alton Spann. 24-year-old graduate student Xiaoxiong Dennis Zheng was shot to death during a robbery in Hyde Park on November 9th of 2021. The incident occurred along a sidewalk in broad daylight on a Tuesday afternoon when the suspect, 19-year-old Alton Spann, approached the victim with a gun. He ordered Zheng to hand over his laptop and personal belongings, but Zheng fought back and was shot in the chest during the struggle. Spann fled the scene in a stolen Ford Mustang and pawned Zheng's iPhone and laptop for $100. In the meantime, Zheng was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital. 11 days after the shooting, police arrested Spann on suspicion of multiple felony charges. He was ultimately indicted on 11 counts, including first-degree murder, armed robbery, and 2 counts of unlawful use of a weapon. The accused killer, who is now 23 years old, pleaded not guilty and remains behind bars at the Cook County Jail while he awaits trial. Number 17. Victoria Moreno. In September of 2022, 34-year-old Victoria Moreno was accused of pushing her toddler nephew, Hosea, into Lake Michigan and letting him drown near Chicago's Navy Pier. Divers found the victim after searching for a half hour, and he died in the hospital 6 days later. According to reports, Moreno stole a family member's truck and took Josiah without permission. She had taken 3 other children to the Navy Pier the previous week and had a history of mental illness, causing her family to worry that she would do it again. Surveillance footage of the crime reportedly showed Moreno staring calmly at the drowning victim while onlookers attempted to rescue him. When police arrived, she pretended not to know Hosea, but was identified by the witnesses and taken into custody. Moreno pleaded not guilty to 3 counts of murder, 2 counts of aggravated kidnapping, and 1 count of aggravated battery to a child. She was found competent to stand trial in 2024 after undergoing a psychological evaluation and starting medication, and the case appears to be ongoing. Number 16. Jaylin Arnold and Adrian Rucker. In a tragic case of friendly fire, 36-year-old Chicago police officer Crystal Rivera was fatally shot by her partner on June 5th of 2025 while pursuing an armed suspect in the city's Chatham neighborhood. Rivera and her partner tried talking to the young man, 27-year-old accused drug dealer Jaylin Arnold. After noticing what looked like a gun in his possession, Arnold ran, sparking a foot chase to a nearby apartment building. Inside one of the apartments, where Arnold reportedly stashed guns and was preparing drugs for sale, officers encountered a second suspect, 25-year-old Adrian Rucker. According to law enforcement, the officer's body cam captured footage of Rucker pointing a rifle at them from behind a sofa. At that same moment, Rivera's partner lost his footing and accidentally discharged his gun, killing Rivera. Rucker is a convicted felon who had 6 outstanding warrants in multiple counties, dating back between 2015 and 2021 at the time of Rivera's death. He was arrested on the night of Rivera's death and remains held without bond on charges of armed violence, possession of a fraudulent ID, and a gun charge. Arnold, who was on parole for a previous case, was captured 2 weeks after the shooting and is also being detained without bond on multiple drug and gun-related charges, as well as a warrant violation. Number 15. Charles Green. 54-year-old Chicago fire captain David Mayer died while battling a deliberately set garage fire in Chicago's Austin neighborhood in April of 2025. He wasn't killed by the blaze itself, but by a structural collapse that occurred after the fire crews had extinguished the flames and were conducting salvage and overhaul operations. Firefighters rescued Mayer, who succumbed to his injuries after being rushed to the hospital. Investigators concluded that the fire was caused by someone igniting the contents of a trash can. The crime was traced to 44-year-old Charles Green, who is facing a murder charge in connection with the case. According to authorities, surveillance footage showed Green lurking near the detached garage less than a minute before the fire broke out. He was the only person seen entering or exiting the alleyway next to the structure during that time period. But the video does not show Green's actions as he walked past the crime scene. He reportedly admitted to the arson during questioning, and police recovered several suspicious items during a search of his residence, including lighter fluid, burned papers, lighters, and suspected clothing from the fire. The case is ongoing and Green remains held without bond at the Cook County Jail. Number 14. Josalyn Fowler. Shortly before 9:30 p.m. on April 16, 2025, gunfire broke out in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood. Witnesses rushed to the aid of 28-year-old Kevin Patel, who had been shot outside his home. He died from his injuries, and police learned that a man and a woman had been seen running from the crime scene. Several days later, police announced the arrest of 25-year-old Josalyn Fowler on charges of murder and attempted armed robbery. 3 years earlier, in 2022, Fowler had been charged with aggravated unlawful use of a weapon in an unrelated case. She pleaded guilty to a reduced misdemeanor charge and was sentenced to time served for the 2 days she spent in lockup. According to police reports, Fowler was walking with her cousin when she approached Patel from behind and tried grabbing his backpack. Patel fought back and Fowler shot him in the chest during the physical struggle that ensued. Prosecutors accused Fowler of dialing 911 while pretending to be a witness and claiming the perpetrators had run in the opposite direction in an attempt to throw law enforcement off her trail. She remains held without bond at the Cook County Jail pending the outcome of her case. Number 13. Keneth Brown. 34-year-old Maria Roque was fatally shot at her home in the Austin neighborhood on Chicago's west side during the early morning hours of December 13, 2023. Investigators were quick to narrow their sights on her ex-boyfriend, 44-year-old Keneth Brown, who already had a warrant out for his arrest for violating an order of protection that the victim had against him. Weeks before her death, Roque had accused Brown of slamming her to the ground during an argument and threatening to set her car on fire and destroy her belongings. In addition to being banned from having any contact with Roque, Brown was ordered not to have any unsupervised visits with the couple's daughter. Roque had just put her daughter into the back seat of her car at around 6:20 a.m. when Brown approached and shot her multiple times as she tried to run away. He was charged with first-degree murder and remains in custody as he awaits trial. Number 12. Omotayo Kassim. 34-year-old Omotayo Kassim's 4-year career with the Chicago Fire Department came to an abrupt halt in early 2024 when he was accused of shooting a man in the face in a road rage incident on New Year's Eve. The altercation occurred in the city's Andersonville neighborhood at around 8 p.m. after a 35-year-old fellow motorist hit Kassim's SUV with his Jeep and attempted to make a U-turn and drive away. Kassim followed the man for several blocks before crashing into his vehicle at an intersection. He then employed a pit maneuver on the Jeep, causing the driver to lose control of the vehicle and sending it straight into some parked cars. After firing a single shot, Kassim's gun jammed. Police soon arrived and seized the weapon, and Kassim was charged with attempted first-degree murder and aggravated battery. He was released on electronic monitoring a few days after his arrest, but records show that he's back in custody without bond while awaiting his next court hearing. Number 11. Rosa Chacon. 21-year-old Rosa Chacon was last seen getting into a ride-share vehicle late one night in January of 2023. 2 months later, her remains were found, wrapped in a sheet and stuffed in a shopping cart in an alleyway on Chicago's southwest side. Chacon's mother told local station WLS-TV that her daughter did not order the Uber that picked her up on the evening of her disappearance, and Rosa also didn't say where she was going or who had ordered the car. More than 2 years later, the young woman's killer remains at large. On the second anniversary of the discovery of Chacon's body, Cook County Crime Stoppers announced a new $1,000 reward for information leading to the indictment or arrest of a suspect. The case remains under investigation, and the authorities are urging anyone with new details to come forward. Number 10. Karl Smith. after being convicted of murdering a gang rival in the early 2000s despite adamantly maintaining his innocence. Kevin Dugar was sentenced to 54 years in prison. The prosecution relied heavily on a sole eyewitness who identified Dugar as the shooter but didn't know him or his twin brother, Karl Smith. In 2013, 10 years after Dugar's punishment was handed down, Smith wrote a letter confessing to being the shooter. Dugar used the letter in his attempts to win a retrial and challenge his case, and in 2016, Smith testified that he had committed the crime and that Dugar was innocent. 2 years later, a judge ruled that Smith's testimony was not credible and denied Dugar a new trial. In addition to the shooting that Dugar claimed to be wrongfully convicted of, he had been sentenced to 99 years in a separate case in which a young boy was shot during a home invasion. But his guilt was ultimately deemed questionable in that case as well. And in 2022, Dugar was released from prison while awaiting a chance to clear his name in court. After he was freed, his defense attorney expressed hope that the prosecution would drop the case, thereby leaving Dugar a completely free man. Updates have not been forthcoming, leaving the current status of Dugar's legal saga unclear. Number 9. Melissa Azul de la Garza. 18-year-old Melissa Azul de la Garza had just finished up some Halloween shopping in late September of 2021 when she was shot multiple times while sitting in her car outside her residence on Chicago's southwest side. Police responded to the scene after being alerted by a nearby shot spotter device, but by the time they arrived, the shooter had fled. Footage from shortly before the incident showed 3 men between the ages of 16 and 23 walking near De La Garza's home. According to police, the trio waited on the corner until the victim arrived home. 2 months after the shooting, authorities announced the arrest of a teenage male suspect in connection with the case. Due to the accused killer's age, his identity was withheld from the public, leaving the outcome of the case unclear. Number 8. John Gately. In August of 2018, a distinguished Chicago attorney named Stephen Shapiro was shot to death at his home in the Chicago suburb of Northfield. Police quickly identified his brother-in-law, 71-year-old John Gately, as the accused shooter and took him into custody following an hours-long standoff at the suspect's home. Prosecutors accused Gately of showing up uninvited at Shapiro's home, where he shot the 72-year-old victim twice in the chest for refusing to let him speak with his sister, Shapiro's wife. Gately also tried to shoot his sister, but the gun jammed. At the time, the 2 siblings were reportedly entangled in a money-related dispute. After the death of their mother, who had financially supported Gately, his sister had become the overseer of the family's finances. She refused to give Gately money at his whim, leading to tensions between the brother and sister. In August of 2022, shortly before the case was scheduled to trial, Gately agreed to a deal and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in exchange for 79 other charges being dropped. He was sentenced to 23 years in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release and credit for time served, which means he'll be around 90 years old when he regains his freedom. Just a month later, Gately tried to withdraw his guilty plea, arguing that he had impaired judgment due to a migraine. Records show that he remains incarcerated in the state prison system, with his original sentence still in effect. Number 7. Richard Chavez. 20-year-old nursing student Charisma Areshman was reported missing after being last seen leaving her Forest View home on January the 23rd of 2022. Several days later, she was found unresponsive and with a jacket covering her face in the backseat of her car in the 5900 block of West Iowa Street. Areshman was pronounced dead at the scene, and the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office ruled it a homicide by strangulation and smothering. A police investigation revealed 24-year-old Richard Chavez as the primary suspect in her killing. Cell phone records indicated that he and Areshman had been talking online and that the young woman had driven to his Oak Park home on January the 23rd. A private surveillance camera recorded him walking on the sidewalk at about 10:40 p.m. and going inside with Areshman. She wasn't seen leaving the residence, and the following morning, Chavez drove her car to the location where it was subsequently found. He then called his brother to give him a lift less than a mile away. After he was taken into custody, Chavez told the police that he and Areshman had consensual relations and that she'd left his home by the time he woke up. While he was being detained, the man phoned his parents in a recorded call telling them to get his passport ready. The case is ongoing, and as of the latest updates, Chavez had been denied bail. Number 6. Antonio Alvarez. Bodies of 30-year-old Illinois State Police Trooper Antonio Alvarez and his wife, Amanda Alvarez Callo, aged 31, were found in a parked car of Chicago's South Side in January of 2022. Both were pronounced dead at the scene from gunshot wounds to the head. As reported by the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office, Amanda's death was ruled a homicide, while the gunshot that had ended Antonio's life appeared to have been self-inflicted. The trooper, a 3-year veteran of the force, and his wife, who worked as a school teacher at Matthew Gallistel Learning Academy, had been having marital problems and were separated. Relatives told the authorities that Amanda had stated plans of leaving her husband and starting a new chapter. It's believed that she'd shared her resolve with Antonio, who then shot her before turning the weapon, which was subsequently recovered from the vehicle, on himself. The couple were survived by 2 young children aged 1 and 4, who were placed in the care of relatives in the tragedy's aftermath. Number 5. Carlton Weekly. While shopping in the upscale Gold Coast community on August the 4th of 2020, rapper FBG Duck was shot multiple times in an attack carried out in broad daylight. The 26-year-old rapper, known as Carlton Weekly, which was his real name, sustained injuries to the groin, chest, and neck. A video circulated on social media in the shooting's wake showed a man in a blue tracksuit, believed to be Weekly, lying face down on the street with 2 officers near him. The bystander who'd taken the video was heard saying, "They shot FBG Duck," in the audio of the footage. The rapper, who was part of the Flyboy gang and signed to Sony Records, was left in critical condition. He was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where he was later pronounced dead. 2 others, a 26-year-old woman and a man in his mid-30s, were severely injured in the shooting, but were subsequently reported to have survived. A federal indictment was unsealed in October of 2021, and it revealed the names of the 5 men who'd been taken into custody and charged with murder in connection to the incident. Aged 22 to 30, they were reported members of the O-Block Street gang, who violently protected its territories on the South Side and claimed responsibility for various acts of violence in the city. Weekly, who often rapped about gun violence, was allegedly affiliated with a rival gang. The authorities reported he'd made derogatory statements about O-Block, which was identified as a possible motive behind the shooting. According to the indictment, Charles Liggins, Kenneth Roberson, Tar Carlos Offord, Christopher Thomas, and Marcus Smart emerged from 2 vehicles and fired approximately 38 shots at Weekly. The men were charged with committing murder in aid of racketeering, assault in the aid of racketeering, and various weapons charges. If the reputed gangsters were found guilty, they faced a minimum sentence of life in prison or the death penalty. Number 4. Tremon Hill. In January of 2019, a student athlete at Phillips High School was charged with murder in the death of a transgender escort with whom he'd been having an intimate relationship. On August the 30th of 2018, Tremon Hill, a high school basketball star and father of 1, lured Dejanae Stanton to a secluded area in the 4000 block of South Calumet Avenue in Bronzeville. It was there that the teenager was alleged to have fatally shot 24-year-old Stanton in the head. In the aftermath, the police analyzed texts exchanged between the two starting on July the 22nd. Hill had lied that he was 18 years old and told Scranton that he was interested in a physical relationship with her. Later that same day, they met at a Southside hotel and had intercourse. Subsequent communication between them underlined an inner conflict on Hill's part, stemming from Scranton being a transgender woman. They arranged the August 30th meeting where Hill allegedly killed his former lover in cold blood. A search warrant served at the teen's home turned up a shirt and pants matching those seen on surveillance video, and the clothing exhibited small blood stains. Hill was charged as an adult and, if convicted, faced a sentence of life in prison, while in the murder's aftermath, activists call for safety measures to prevent future violence against transgender women. Number 3. Kaylyn Pryor. A street in Chicago was renamed in the spring of 2022 to honor the memory of a young woman who'd been gunned down roughly 6 years previously. 20-year-old Kaylyn Pryor had just won a modeling contract out of 500 competitors and was on the verge of a promising career before her life was cut short in November of 2015. She'd grown up in Evanston and was on her way to catch a bus after visiting her grandmother in Englewood. Someone opened fire from a passing SUV, and the young woman, who wasn't believed to have been the intended target, was shot and killed. No suspects were ever arrested, and the model's murder remained unsolved as of the latest updates. In April of 2022, family and friends returned to 74th and South May Street corner to unveil a sign dedicated to Pryor. In the years since her passing, the victim's father, Alan Scott, devoted his life to anti-violence causes. He expressed hopes that the sign would renew interest in Pryor's case, reminding people there was a $30,000 reward for the arrest and conviction of her killer. Today's topic was requested by Slick Rick 1 and official KCG Kobe. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Londre Sylvester. In July of 2021, moments after being released from the Cook County Jail, a local drill rapper was ambushed and shot numerous times. 31-year-old Londre Sylvester, who went by the stage name KTS Dre, died after suffering up to 64 gunshot wounds all over his body. Sylvester had walked out of the jail and towards a vehicle which had been waiting for him when unidentified shooters pulled up in 2 cars and unleashed a hail of bullets on him. A 60-year-old woman who was accompanying the rapper was shot in the knee, while a second woman who was passing through the area was grazed by a bullet in the mouth. Both victims were reported as being in good condition after receiving medical attention. A processing photo from the Cook County Sheriff's showed Sylvester with a series of prominent tattoos across his body, including a target symbol on his neck alongside the phrase, "Kill to survive." He'd been detained for violation of a bail bond after allegedly failing to meet conditions of his release in a 2020 felony gun case. It's unclear if the brutal ambush had been gang-related, a personal vendetta, or some other form of retaliation, and as per the latest information released to the media, no arrests had been made. Number 1. Chicago Rippers. In the early 1980s, Robin Gecht, along with brothers Andrew and Thomas Cocorellis and Edward Spreitzer, carried out a series of horrific killings in Chicago and the broader Illinois area. Collectively known as the Chicago Rippers or the Ripper Crew, they abused and mutilated women while they were still alive, as well as cannibalized and further desecrated their remains in death. They were reported to have taken sadistic pleasure in their crimes while operating as a satanic cult. At 30 years old, the group's eldest, Gecht, was identified as the leader and mastermind, with one detective working on the case later claiming that he made Manson look like a Boy Scout. The Rippers were suspected in the disappearances of 17 women and the unrelated random drive-by fatal shooting of 28-year-old drug dealer Rafael Tirado, their only male victim. Gecht and the others claimed their first victim on May the 23rd of 1981. They abducted 28-year-old Linda Sutton in their van, and her lifeless body was found 10 days later in a field in Villa Park, Illinois, mutilated and with her left breast amputated. The Rippers claimed several more female victims in the Chicago area, using the same modus operandi, which involved kidnapping and subjecting them to ritualistic torture and abuse prior to killing them in ways that included strangling, stabbing, or shooting. On December the 6th, 20-year-old Beverly Washington, who'd become the Rippers' last victim, was found clinging to life by a railroad track. In addition to other injuries, her left breast had been amputated and her right breast was nearly cut off. She survived and gave a detailed description of her attackers in the van they'd used, which led to their arrest. Thomas Cocorellis confessed that he and the others had abducted women and taken them to Gecht's home, called a satanic chapel. It was there that the victims were ritualistically abused and had their breasts amputated with a wire garrote, often while they were still alive. Cocorellis reported that the men would then eat portions of the severed parts as a sacrament. Gecht was also reported to have pleasured himself in them before placing the body parts in a box, in which Cocorellis said he'd once seen over a dozen of them. The victims were then executed, reportedly as Gecht read verses from the Satanic Bible. Gecht was the only one to maintain his innocence and was only convicted of attempted murder and other related charges stemming from Washington's non-fatal abuse and assault. Deemed a devil and monster by the presiding judge, he was sentenced to 120 years in prison and will be eligible for parole in 2042. Thomas Cocorellis was given a more lenient sentence for his cooperation and released in 2019, while his brother Andrew was executed via lethal injection in 1999 and was the last inmate to be executed in the state of Illinois before
capital punishment was abolished in 2011. Spritzer, labeled by the prosecution as every woman's nightmare, was given a death sentence that was later commuted to life without parole.
Thanks for watching. If you had to share a jail cell with one of these two infamous figures from Chicago history, R. Kelly or Al Capone, who would you choose and why? Let us know in the comments section below.